And you've just heard Patient Has Own Supply, the current single from Constant Follower. And I'm delighted to be joined by Stephen McAll, Constant Follower's main man now. Hello, Stephen.
Hello there.
So what can you tell us about Patient Has Own Supply?
Oh, where to begin?
Yeah, I
mean,
know.
yeah, I find myself.
Before you answer that, I'm interested because, I ask questions like that. And of course, sometimes an adequate answer would be, well, you decide for yourself. I'm making music. How do you interpret it? But, is that something that you sometimes feel when people ask questions about what does it mean or whatever?
Most of the time I'm in the position where I don't really know what it means either. Because the way that I write the songs, it's very stream of consciousness. I'll sit down with maybe a couple of lines, something that I've heard somewhere that I've stolen, that someone said or that was said on a TV program or something like that.
Yeah.
It just kind of resonated. I'll sit with that and I'll just kind of play the guitar, and from that one wee bit, a whole song will come out, And the song just very much, when I'm writing songs, I'm not intentionally sitting there I'm going to write a song about this time this thing happened or about the injustices that we suffer as musicians, nothing like that. So my songs, they come out as they are, and a lot of the time I wouldn't know what they mean at first. I kind of have a sense, but it's maybe a month, 2 months, even right up until they've been recorded and released, that it'll just come to me, oh my God, and it'll come all in a wonder, the emotion and what it means, So this one's different. This is the one song that I've ever written that's kind of about a thing, or at least the genesis of the song was about a thing, and it's about this negative experience I had when I was a teenager, when I'd had this kind of major assault, and I was trying to deal with the aftermath of that, and I was experimenting with drugs really to self-medicate. And this one night, my parents were away on holiday, and I had got a whole load of this in, and I was sitting there experimenting, and basically took way too much and ended up in hospital. And in the hospital, I was treated by the doctors in a way that was really quite cruel for a teenager, that was lost at the time. And I think they were trying to give me tough love, is all I can really explain it, because they put me at the end of this corridor on a ward full of other people and pulled the curtain around me and left me up there with the curtain pulled around me for 3 days pretty much. And the nurses would come in, they wouldn't speak to me, and the doctors would come in, they wouldn't speak to me, and they'd hardly look at me, So I just had this, after recovering, after coming down off the drugs and my heart recovering to some extent, then I was left for those days alone. And on the day that my parents came to get me and I was released home, I was given, when they release you, they give you a discharge letter.
Yeah, sure.
On the discharge letter, where it said medication, the doctor had written patient has own supply, kind of reference to the drugs that I had come in on. So, I mean, kind of cruel for a teenager who, but I think they maybe thought I was wasting a bed that should have been there for somebody else that needed it, more.
It does seem fairly brutal, and I guess some attempt at a sense of humour from the doctor, which spectacularly wasn't funny.
Yeah, spectacularly wasn't funny, yeah. And it's funny, of all the things from round about that period that I don't remember, I just vividly remember this. And in fact, the letter was kicking about in my family until fairly recently. I wanted to find it for the album artwork, but we couldn't find it.
So you mentioned the album there, because this is one of the singles released from the forthcoming album early in the new year. Is that right?
28th of February, it's coming on Last Night from Glasgow. So the album's been, I've had it completed for quite a while, and we did the thing where we were sort of trying to work out what record label really suited it. I had a few offers of different people that wanted to put it out, but having had experiences with a couple of labels in the past, especially with the first album that we did, and basically not being paid a penny, more or less, for it. We decided, well, I decided that I had to make some money from this one. So I was looking about at labels who were kind of artist centric and really focused on fairness, and the label that was right on my doorstep was Last Night from Glasgow, artist centric, trying to pay artists the most that they can. And lots of artists that I know and respect are I've had dealings with them. So I approached Ian and let him hear the record, and he absolutely jumped for it.
Fantastic. And was he aware of your work before that? Was it something that...
He was aware of my work, but when I went to meet with him, he said to me, I listened to your work and it's not that faux Scots hiddly diddly stuff that I thought it was. So he had a really, I think he'd never heard it, but he just somehow had developed this impression that it was that kind of indie folk sort of.
It's so interesting, isn't it? That people maybe hear a name or they see a picture or whatever it might be. They see a title of a song sometimes and they make up their own mind. Oh yeah, I know what that's going to sound like. And so often that's just not the case.
Totally. And we do it all the time. I do it all the time, and all the time I'm surprised when I actually get to know an artist and I think, oh my goodness, man, that I've been hating them all these years for no reason.
There's a fantastic musician goes under the name of Sapien, who made one of my favourite singles of last year. And his look is absolutely, he used to be in a metal band, and his look is still the long hair and total, you think this is going to be dark as anything. And the track that I loved last year wasn't disco, but it was really electronic, upbeat. It was fabulous. It was just so different if you looked at the, and I know he'd made music that was fitting with perhaps the image before, but he just totally changed, got new influences and went, this is the music I want to make now. And I just love when someone just surprises you in that way.
Totally, that's cool.
And so in terms of the album, what can we expect? Is it going to kind of moved on from previous releases?
I hope it's moved on. I think for me, I'm never really consciously pursuing a sound or consciously pursuing anything. I'm just kind of trying to do what the song seems to want done, So, but I think in some ways there's a progression. I mean, there's drums. We've added drums to a couple of the tracks, which hasn't been in any of the recordings that I've done so far. And with this one, I had recorded and mixed all the tracks myself just to get them to a certain how I imagined it, and then I had the chance to go over to Austin and mix the album with this guy called Dan Duzinski. Now, Dan had been producing some of my favorite records of the last years. He's a member of the band Loma, who are on Sub Pop, who I think not only are the records just so beautiful and so spacious, and the songs are great, but it's this level of production that I feel like I say this all the time, but I love a record that you might listen to it for the 1000th time and find something new, where there's just little details all over the place that are really important that you never notice right at the start, but the more you listen, the deeper in you get. And this is, I think Dan is kind of the master of this, So I had approached him and said to him, I love your records. I love Cross Record. I love Loma. I love these other records that you're producing. How's about producing me? And he listened to the music. He said, for sure, And we just kind of, thanks to some funding from Creative Scotland, made it happen. And I went over there and sat with him for a month. I lived out of an RV that was on his ranch. He's got this kind of studio ranch just out of Texas, out of Austin, in a place called Dripping Springs. And I stayed in this old abandoned RV pretty much, with a door that didn't even close properly, and the coyotes screaming outside the window in the night. We'd get up every morning and go into his studio, and we just work on the tracks, one by one, letting this, he would just bring out this magic that was already there that I hadn't quite, I was trying to do it myself, but I just don't have the skills yet to be able to do the things that he does. And he would add in places where there was a little bit of space, he might add in something magical, you know, like a wee synth line or something like that, and we'd work together to get the sounds. And then eventually there was a few songs that he could see what I was trying to do. I was trying to build this excitement in them. And we realized that the only way to get it to where I wanted it was adding on some drums. So
Right.
just very sparingly sort of played about with drums until we found stuff that didn't take up too much space, but added to the excitement.
It's interesting you decided to go all the way to Austin to do that for a month, because especially since what a lot of bands and musicians have been through in lockdown, there was a kind of increase in remote working, you know, that kind of thing. But do you feel it's really important to be in situ with the person that you're working with?
There's nothing that beats being in the room with the person, you know, and actual air moving from speakers. I think like
Yeah,
you can do it remotely and you can get a great result. And I've heard records that have been done entirely like that and sound absolutely brilliant, you know, and have that emotion and have that depth. But for me, I'm quite slow at working, you know. So I think that to be in the room with someone where decisions are made on the spot, it just makes everything 10 times faster. It means that you can rectify problems really, really quickly, and you sort of get a vibe for each other as well, you know. I think
yeah,
after the first few days, there was a lot of stuff became unsaid, you know, where we'd already went through that getting to know each other sort of process. So it meant that the work just happened super fast. And that's important when you're in when you're with someone whose time is extremely expensive, like Dan's is, you know.
sure. And what about the process of making albums? Because Constant Follower is at heart, it's yourself. You know, it's your songs, but you've got other people who come in and provide a lot of the other instrumentation, things like that. How does it work?
So the songs are all written by me and kind of hashed out a bit by me before I take them to the band. But there's a solid Constant Follower band. Andrew Pankhurst on guitar, David Guild on bass, Gareth Perry on keys, and well, for the recording, for live, you've got Fiona McKenzie on vocals, and Fiona will be singing on the new recordings. But on the previous recordings, the vocals were always Amy Campbell and my partner Kathleen Stosh. And it's just and I mean, for me, the vocals is the most important part, you know, so that would always be left till last. Would put down a scratch. So how it would work is I would write the songs, then I would come into this place here and I would record my acoustic guitar and then my vocal, and then everything else would go around that. First of all, I would get Curd in, Andrew Pankhurst, and he would, having never heard the song, he would just kind of respond in real time. And I'd play the song to him. He'd play one take, then we'd do another take and another take, and until I was sort of happy. I'd be sitting listening, waiting for little bits of magic. And as soon as I felt like I had enough of those, I'd say to him, right, okay. And he would go, and then I would sit through the night that night and take apart everything that he'd done and just pick all those bits of magic that made me feel things and kind of layer them all onto the one track. And then I would do that again with the other people. And then at that stage, once I had the band all sort of on there, I'd be able to hear what gaps there was, or I'd imagine bringing somebody else in, like on one track, I could hear harp, so I brought in our friend from Berlin, Andy Aquarius, on harp, and he did some stuff, and yeah, various other people. There's a guitarist that is on almost every other track as well, called Jimmy Chadwin, who has a unit just around the corner from here, which makes it very, very easy to get him in. But his guitar is so different from Cud's guitar, you know, it's like a completely different style, more country or something like that, but it really just adds this depth that I'm going for. But unfortunately for Cud, when we do it live, I'm saying to him, right, play your bits that I've kind of comped from all your takes. That's hard enough, but also play Jimmy's bits at the same time, you know. So it's a kind of a collage or a mix and match that I do, and it just takes time sort of finding where I feel like everything belongs in the soundscape. And most of the time, these guys are so good, you know. I think Kurd and Dave Guild on bass and Gareth, they really are the best musicians I could find to work with, you know, and people who's not just technically brilliant, but whose music taste aligns with mine, you know, and they introduce me to new stuff all the time. So it's a process of taking stuff away rather than, you know, having to add stuff most of the time. There's just so much great stuff that they come up with, especially in that responding to the music way, you know, where I think that's where the magic lies, is that the way that these guys who are amazing musicians just respond instantly before they've thought about it, you know. I think, and the more they think about it, the more that gets in the way of that magic.
Yeah, so the initial response is where the kind of, for you, is where the magic lies. Because sometimes when musicians, they'll say, oh, I could do that a bit better, I could do that a bit, and there'll be takes and takes and takes. But you're kind of saying, no, let's go for the initial feeling.
Yeah, that rawness and all those mistakes. And I mean, it's exactly that. For example, with Jimmy Chadman, when I get him in, he is a perfectionist, right? And he won't mind me saying that, but when I got him in for this album, on the last track that we did, within the first 2 or 3 takes that he'd done, I knew I had all the things that I wanted there, and I knew I had this magic, then some amazing bits that really made my heart flutter. But he insisted, he was like, no, let me have another go at that, you know, and I'll just get it right. And the closer he got to his perfection, the further away it was from that thing that made me feel stuff, you know, which is really weird because it was the perfect thing he was playing by the end of it. But somehow it was just so at odds with the emotion and the mistakes and the realness that was in that first thing he did, you know.
And you mentioned that often your lyrics are kind of stream of consciousness. And just after having what you said about the music and how you kind of take the best bits from certain recordings, is there something similar going on with your lyrics? Do you ever think, yeah, that works or that works? How is it, if it's stream of consciousness, how's the actual writing process?
The lyrics are the lyrics are very, very different. So I have a little book that I carry about with me, and anything that catches my ear, I'll write it down in there, or I'll be driving in the car and I'll be taking audio notes all the time, you know, just little things that comes into my head for whatever reason. And then, like I say, I'll sit down with the guitar and I'll just play and I'll play, and I'll be looking at the wee book, flicking through, and something, a line will catch my eye, and I'll start with that at the top of a page, and then, yeah, the next line will just come, and then the next line will just come, and the next line, and run like that. And normally I'll have like 3 verses, and then I'll need to think about choruses.
Yeah.
And the choruses will always come after. But the way that the words come out, very little has changed. You know, I don't move stuff about an awful lot. I change the odd word.
Yeah.
But I never like change full lines, I wouldn't say. You know, it comes out very that cliche, but fully formed, more or less, you know. And I think there's some of it, sometimes a line will come out and it'll sound stupid to me, you know. But then with time, that just becomes the line, you know. And actually, the depth of meaning that I'll then give that later for myself, you
Yeah.
know, oh my God, I'll find the meaning in it, and it'll be deeply meaningful to me, and it'll be deeply resonant with something that's happening in my life at that time. The same as anyone else would, you know. So some of those lines that come out that seem daft, or, you know, they end up, I just allow them to be, and I just say, well, it's mysterious rather than daft.
So you feel that they're in there for a reason. So if they come out, you think, I'm not sure why that's come out, but sometimes that reveals itself over a period of time.
Exactly. I think that it's coming out for a reason, and I think it's me speaking to myself. I think that all the songs are me speaking to myself, and trying to resolve something.
And are you going to be playing live for the album? I think you've got a launch coming up.
There's a launch in Cottier's Theatre on the 27th of February, so that's the day before the album comes out fully. And playing in Cottier's is a funny one because it's kind of in a previous life, I was a promoter, and the first thing I ever did was a 5-day festival in Cottier's Theatre. For some reason, me and my mates, against advice, programmed this massive festival, you know, and we brought bands from across the world. We brought Turco Carrot and Schneider TM and a bunch of the band Hood at the time were really well. All these bands from everywhere, and we basically lost many thousands of pounds, but had a absolutely brilliant week. So going back to Cottagers for this gig, you know, the launch of the second album, just it felt right, and we're partnering with 432, who are promoters in Glasgow that I really like. We're partnering with them to put it on. So
that's a great space. That'll be a special night, I think.
Yeah.
And just before we play another track from the album, you've made music in the past with Scott William Urquhart. Is there going to be more of that collaboration to come?
Yeah, so we've already started
Oh, brilliant.
to follow up to that, just kind of putting together some ideas at the moment, you know, and yeah, it's just really finding the time. I mean, Scott is one of the most prolific writers I know, and every time I meet him, he's got another 5 amazing tracks that would be great for this, you know, and they let me hear them, and they are just all brilliant, every single one of them. So with our collaboration, really, the problem is too much stuff rather than not enough stuff, and not enough time rather than too much time, you know. So it's just, yeah, we're going to sit down and really get stuck in the next couple of months, I think.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. All the best with the album when it comes out.
Thank you.
And this is Constant Follower, and all is well.